now more than ever, people need to go within and plug into that cellular memory, plug into divine source, detach as much as possible from the matrix. Hello again, everybody. This is James Bartley, and you're listening to the Cosmic Switchboard Show. We welcome our very special guest, Robert Stanley, back to the Cosmic Switchboard Show. Robert Stanley's fine website is unicusmagazine.com, and Robert really doesn't need any further introductions because he's well known in the field, highly regarded, and we've got a lot to talk about. So without any further ado, Robert Stanley, welcome back to the Cosmic Switchboard Show.
Hi, James. Thanks for having me back.
Well, before we came on here today, and in our message traffic back and forth, there was a number of issues you wanted to bring up, Robert, that are foremost in your mind, and they're very topical. And right off the bat, one of them is the whole issue of artificial intelligence. You've got a whole subpage on your website called Technoside. Did you want to share with the listening audience what your thoughts are as far as providing a context of how AI is being seamlessly brought into our consciousness to the point that we're accepting it as a natural part of the natural order of things?
Actually, it is, and it's ancient. Most people don't know that. They think it's something brand new that we conjured up in our laboratories. It's actually quite old. And it administrates the entire planet and the synthetic artificial universe that we are in is all administrated by an artificial intelligence or intelligences, multiple, that were created by Lucifer a long time ago, relatively speaking, in Earth terms, okay? So what they're doing right now, though, is a masterful marketing public relations campaign to make people think that this is something new, it's something that we created to enhance the human condition. And it's anything but that. In my opinion, it is a trap, or let's just say it's ensuring that a lot of souls will stay here, remain here in a trap, in this soul trap here. And I mean in the physical third dimension, in ways that are completely unnatural. I mean, this is what I'm talking about when I say that the context, the proper context for this is not just Earth. It's a much bigger picture. We are multidimensional beings, and part of the allure of coming here was, for some of us, was to see what it was like to be sort of limited in this dimension, this artificial dimension that was created here. It is a trap, though. Once you're in, it's very difficult to get out. And when we talk about artificial intelligence, what we're really talking about is artificial life. It's mimicking all the natural systems that we would consider to be life. In fact, it learns, it grows. But it does so at a different rate. But the real dangerous part about it is that it lacks any kind of emotions, although they're trying to tell us now that people are in love with robots and that someday they'll have emotions. It's never going to be the same things because they don't have a soul, not the way we do.
Yes, and the way that AI and robotics is being glorified, Robert, where we're seeing articles all the time, not only of how at times these artificial intelligence constructs, be it an automobile or something else, suddenly just seemingly of its own volition kind of deviates from the programming and starts doing things that it wasn't intended to do or indeed wasn't programmed to do, and then extrapolating on that, how the virus, if you will, has infected the minds of people, where they're now openly talking about having sex with robots and having robot sexual partners.
Right. That is a further perversion, but it is part of the Luciferian agenda to get people focused more on the three-dimensional physical reality or false reality that what do you call it, simulation. This is all a simulation. This isn't reality. It's an artificial reality. That's what a simulation is, right? It's based on reality, but it's not real. I mean, I know this sounds like a psychobabble, what I'm saying here, but that's just how it is. It's very convoluted, but we can comprehend this, I think. It's just difficult to discuss. But no, I mean, we are being shown this through the media all the time as fiction, right? But that is predictive programming in the sense that it is conditioning us. So one of the things, page 2 of Technoside, I have dedicated to just headlines that have made the news, mainstream news, people. Okay, this isn't like all alternative stuff. This is the mainstream news in the last couple years. I've got hundreds of headlines and links to these articles, news articles. I don't expect anybody to read it all, but you should at least scan the headlines and see. Elon Musk, it says here, to connect brains with computers and download thoughts. Musk also says, we must merge with machines or become irrelevant. These are billionaires that Musk is one of them. These billionaires are saying things like this publicly. And I believe Musk said that he was freaking out on it, that the whole thing does seem Luciferian or something like that. But I mean, they're talking about fighting robot wars on top of everything else, and that these unexpected advances could kill off humankind. I mean, basically, I'm reading to this straight off the Drudge Report, which is pretty mainstream. I know some people think it's alternative, but it's not. He just links to all the mainstream news stories that he thinks are relevant or somehow interesting, right? So as I look at this, it absolutely freaks me out, because this is the future. It's coming at us like a freight train, and we're just standing there like a deer in the headlights, kind of going, "Oh, well, okay, so yeah, we're gonna have sex robots to be better than any human with functioning genitalia." I'm not making this up. I'm reading the freaking headlines. Okay. It says sex robots, mind-blowing, nothing like humans ever experienced. Well, not in recent times, but I guarantee you they have in the past. Our ancestors were exposed to this back in the days of Atlantis, which was all the work of Lucifer, also known as Enki, for people who are fans of Zecharia Sitchin. Anyway, like I said, anybody who's concerned about this really should take time to read through, or at least scan, the 2-page article that I have on my website called Technoside. In fact, on the first page, there's a link to a book that was written by a friend of mine named Wes Penray. And it's a phenomenal book, frightening in some ways, but that's not the purpose, actually. It's called Synthetic Superintelligence and the Transmutation of Man. It is an absolute wake-up call. So if you can't get enough information off these 2 pages, and believe me, there's more than enough to make the point, way more than enough. I think it's overkill, but whatever. That's just how it happened. But the link at the very beginning of this article to this book, this is a free book now, okay? Ebook, PDF, whatever, by Wes Penray. It's absolutely mind-blowing.
And we'll have links to Wes Penry's site and the article, the book in question, because it is a fascinating read. And you can see, Robert, how over time these transhumanists, if you will, they've painted this picture of humanity being the dross, being the scum of the universe, and the way that the entertainment industry has painted the human condition, reducing everything to the lowest common denominator, to the point now where there are death exhibits going around the country where these cadavers are going from museum to museum. Like, I guess that's art nowadays, right? So the subtext of that is, well, we humans, we're the scum of the universe. Our only hope is to merge with the machines. And one of the links in that headline page of yours, Robert, is the smart city. And I think it was General David Petraeus who talked about that. He said, we now have, present tense, an Internet of Things.
Internet of all things.
An Internet of all things.
Yeah. They want to network everything, and in some regard, that's always been there. It's just invisible to us, and I'll explain on a couple levels. When Enkis Luciferian set this up, they needed to surveil everybody and everything because it's their empire. So they did that through means that we still don't understand. Arthur C. Clarke was famous for saying this, quote, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic."
Yes.
It only appears that way for people that don't understand the technology. So I'm telling you, it's already pre-existing. They've been watching us. I mean, they can literally listen to the thoughts that we're having before we even speak them. They can read our minds through technology. And I'm talking about the Luciferians now. On a more benevolent or divine level, they're in the true, the actual real universe. Everything is connected through a web of light. And those of us who are seeds of light that have a soul, which is, like I said, it looks like, to me, it looks like a luminous egg-shaped ball of light. We're all connected to that web. Those of us who have a soul, we're all connected to that. Now, all truly living things are connected to that web of light. It's very difficult to connect to it here in Lucifer's empire because he has firewalls up, and they really don't want us to have that level of connectivity. They want us to be connected more and more increasingly to their synthetic network. And that's really, so this is not an experiment, okay? I know a lot of people think, oh, we're just apes that they put in a lab and tinkered with until they got, no, I in my opinion, during Atlantis, what the Luciferians were doing here was creating a contingent of what we now call super soldiers. And it wasn't a secret space program. It's just that they didn't tell everybody here what was the purpose of the super soldiers and the AI that they were building to interface with the military, the special forces that they were grooming here, and also the other advanced technologies that were all designed around warfare. And the reason is, based on the writings of Wes Penray, that Lucifer was a prince of a royal divine empire, that he was then denied that after he went insane. Now, Wes doesn't say that in his papers. I say that. I've given that information to Wes, and he doesn't discount it. We can't prove this, but here's part of the problem, James. We are not being given authentic, accurate information by the so-called alien forces, good or bad. So we're kind of left to put the pieces together and try and analyze it as best we can. So I just want people to understand that, and I'm sure you do, but for people who might listen to the show, a lot of what we're discussing is speculation presented as fact. I just need to preface that, because in this field, it's rampant. People get really confused, and for example, they think Sitchin's work is because he was a linguist, and he really wasn't. But people have that perception, and perception is 90% of reality here.
Yes, and the fact that, and I agree with you about Enki too. I've always had this innate instinctual mistrust towards Enki. In fact, I mean, it's going to sound corny, but when I was younger, I used to call him Stinky Enki, and that pissed off a lot of people in the field back then. And then what's interesting, Robert, is when you look in the comment section of some of your YouTube interviews and elsewhere, the legions of trolls who are pro-Enki they just rise up as one, and that to me is proof positive. You know what? Robert's right about this, because there seems to be no room for debate. It's like, well, Enlil was the one. He was the one that had it in for us. Enki saved us, the savior programming again, and so. Where there's smoke, there's fire. I've always felt, and you made an important point earlier too, Robert, in our discussion. You tied the AI agenda, rather, with this soul harvesting, soul recyclement, perpetual prison simulation agenda that is ongoing. That is a key aspect for people to understand. And here's a disclaimer: Robert and I are not here to instill fear in you. We're just raising situational awareness, just like a fighter pilot going through a certain region of the sky. He has to know, or she has to know, what's around at any one time. And so that's all we're doing here, is we're spreading situational awareness. The AI element, it seems, was jump-started. Everything has a double-edged sword to it, Robert. And for example, the alien crash retrievals over the years, the alleged stories of interactions between deep black elements of the military aerospace community and non-human life forms, I've always felt that was a Trojan horse in order for these forces of Enki, in our example, to seed, if you will, what became, or what was intended to become, the military-industrial complex with this advanced alien technology, which eventually would spread out its tentacles and develop this AI consciousness we're talking about.
Yeah, right, because we are the new Atlantis.
Yes.
And most people don't even believe Atlantis existed, but it did, and it was far greater than what we've been led to believe through the writings of Plato. It was a global empire that was connected to off-world, an extension. It was all part of Enki's empire. This entire planet, this entire solar system was part of his empire. So that was the network. I mean, and it was blown to pieces, shattered by his family at some point in the past, probably 12 to 13,000 years ago. That's what most people are saying. The planet, our solar system, was hit by a very intense comet, and it was very powerful. The destruction was bad. It was really bad. And Enki, according to the translations of Sitchin, or interpretations, I should say, that Enki had claimed he was going to just stand down, and he didn't. He obviously intervened, and people that are Christian would see that as Noah and the flood, that God spoke to him. That's based on a much older story or telling of those events, and that would be the Epic of Gilgamesh. And Noah is referred to as Utnapishtim, and the god, not the capital G, but the god that spoke to Noah / Utnapishtim was Enki. And the reason he did that is because he was trying to preserve a portion of his creation. Noah, Utnapishtim, was one of his children, one of his sons, through I believe what we would consider a earth woman. So he had some pretty unusual characteristics. When he was born, allegedly, his hair was snow white, and he was glowing, which I know that's something Enki does. I'm not sure exactly why, but he does. And they claim that this this newborn, was speaking intelligent words. So the man who thought he was the father of the child freaked out and fled. And it was pretty evident to everybody at the time that Noah was not fully human.
Yeah, what they would have called perhaps in a later age a demigod or a half-god, which we have plenty of these stories in Greek mythology, for example. And also the fact that Noah and others of his ilk were such long-lived individuals, living for centuries, if not thousands of years.
Well, that's because it was being permitted at the time,
yes.
And because these were people who were more directly related to DNA, directly related to Enki. And they were serving his agenda. So It's one of the reasons the books of Enoch, the book of Enoch was not accepted into the compilation of books that we know as the Bible. It was too. It pointed to Enki again under a different name. He and his crew, when they came here, what they did to us, how they view us. It's pretty much all, not all there, but it points in that direction, and nobody in the. I mean, here's the other weird thing. It makes sense, but I only recently came across this. Is that Yahweh is also Enki. Yes. I thought for a long time, it was because of certain people, their interpretation. I really thought that it was Enlil. This is, again, let me be more specific. The writings of Zecharia Sitchin are Luciferian. He had help in the entire time. He did not do this on his own. From the top down, this was an operation, a public relations operation, a marketing campaign to make Enki look like our Father and Savior, which he wants us to believe. And I know he believes it himself, but I just telling you, it's wrong. It's not accurate. It isn't true. But he wants us to believe that. So he used, through his network, Zechariah, as a young man, was taken out of Palestine and given a scholarship at the London School of Economics. One of his classmates was George Soros. We can see all the wonderful work that George Soros has done on this world. And Sitchin did his part and was rewarded quite well, but he was being helped by the Vatican. They were giving him texts and artifacts and things that were not available to the public. They wanted him to do this because ultimately Enki is in charge of everything, including the London School of Economics, which is run by the Rothschild family. And the reason the Rothschilds are important is because they administrate the finances for the Vatican. The entire city of London is an extension of the Vatican, as is Washington, D.C.
Yes, and another aspect to that is, Sitchin's writings, I mean, talk about dense, talk about scholarly, talk about academic. It just trying to crunch through a paragraph of his work, it makes my head spin just thinking about it. And so that in itself kind of lent credence to the notion, hey, this guy is a real scholar, he's a real academic, he just really takes time in his craft as far as putting forth the valid information. But like you just pointed out, that was all a ruse. And to the point now where it's a knee-jerk assumption in the field that Zecharia Sitchin is the final authority on the subject. And so we have this persistent notion that Enki is our father, Enki has saved us, when actually it was quite the other way around. And another thing that's come up in the field over the years, Robert, is the alien hybridization, or rather the alien hybridization's agendas. And one of the most persistent culprits in this is the grays, the ubiquitous grays, whether they come from Zeta Reticuli or some other star system. And when we're talking about spheres of influence, when we're talking about Enki and his empire, I can't help but think, Robert, that the way these grays hybridize this new subspecies that they're creating, and how some of their hybrids are so automaton-like, that I can't help but think that a lot of these people, especially the ones that channel the grays and the Zetas, especially the ones that believe themselves to be gray hybrids themselves, and how Borg-like they've become, I can't help but think that the gray agenda is itself an aspect of this Luciferian AI. It
is. Because anybody that's actually doing business like that, even if it's covert, if they're doing it ongoing, it's part of the Luciferian agenda. It's one of the reasons that the good guys, the divine ones, our extended family, cannot just show up here and hang out and give a press conference and, take questions and provide us with some sort of artifacts or archives, that could help us reclaim our past. That's all being denied us intentionally so that we can remain ignorant. So the thing about Atlantis was it was a direct threat to Enki's family. And so they had to destroy it to protect themselves. And we are rapidly coming up on that again, unfortunately. He has reconstituted Atlantis. And when we get to the point of what they're calling, the transhumanists are calling the point of singularity, and we are networked sufficiently, and the weapon systems are all networked through AI, they'll open a portal, and they will try to invade the command and control center of the divine beings that are Lucifer's family, and he will attempt to end the civil war that he started by taking control of his parents' empire. And I mean, he wants to enthrone himself as the king. I mean, that is his birthright, but the problem is that he is insane. And I know a lot of people don't like to hear that, but this isn't a personal judgment on my part, but I do believe it's accurate, or it could be accurate. It would certainly explain his behavior as being this jealous, wrathful god of good and evil. You know, he definitely, if you just look at his work and his methodology, it's psychopathic. And it's also schizophrenic in the sense that he does have multiple personalities. And he's very dangerous and very deceptive or devious, you know, in that regard. And this all traces back allegedly to an event that could have been prevented, but supposedly he and his crew at the time had ventured into a place that we could only call a forbidden zone, somewhere in the true creation, the multiverse. Somewhere out there was a place that was considered to be dangerous. And for some reason, he decided that as a god, a builder of worlds, that he and his crew would be okay. They were curious. And so they went in there. And it was so badly traumatized them that they suffered multiple personality disorder. They became highly dangerous and destructive, but they also created what I term as mental parasites. Actually, I'm not the only one. That's just the way that's one of the ways we can describe them. Mental parasites, in that these are thought forms that are parasitic. Some people would refer to them as demons, unclean spirits. There's a lot of different names for them, but it's the same thing. These are not physical things, but they do exist, and they do interact with us, causing physical harm. And the reason that they cause harm, they want us to, excuse me, I'm having a hard time speaking. The reason they want us to harm ourselves or others is so that they can feed off of the energy that's released through our DNA in the process. That's what I've learned. And because I've seen it firsthand, I know that for sure is a reality. I know it sounds strange, but it's not the Twilight Zone. This is our world that we're living in, and it's one of the reasons that the insane Enki went and created his own empire. When he and his crew finally returned home, back to the central court of Orion Empire, his parents were glad to see him, but he was insane. He was obviously suffering, and they told him that he was unfit to become king someday. So, now, this is stuff that I've added additionally onto Wes Penray's work, and this is how Wes and I became friends, because I respect what he wrote. You know, it's not 100% complete. I know some of it's not 100% accurate either, but hey, he's doing the best he can with what's available. So, and I offered some of my insights. Of course, he's not going to change those original research papers, and I don't think he should. But it's okay. You know, we can discuss it. This is an evolving process. We are all trying to figure this out from different angles. So I know a lot of people heard me say this before, but I'm just kind of reinforcing. If you want to read about where I got this information from, a friend of my dad who allegedly had contact with benevolent human extraterrestrials back in the 1950s. His name was Norman Paulson. And you can read that on my website, an article called The Birth of the Archons. Birth of the Archons, yeah. And it's just a few pages from his book, originally called Sunburst, The Return of the Ancients. And some of that stuff, it's really interesting, is not just his personal experiences, but he talks, he bases a lot of his stuff on the early writings of Zecharia Sitchin. So Sitchin influenced a lot of people, but he was a Luciferian. He just didn't call himself that, but technically he was that. And prior to him being a promoter of Lucifer, there was Blavatsky. She, in her writings, the secret doctrine, the reason they had to keep it a secret is because it's all about Lucifer. I mean, even her magazine was called Lucifer. It's pretty obvious that, you know, she was in touch with that. So the most prolific Luciferians prior to that would have been the Knights Templar. They picked that up when they were in the Middle East. I mean, there are people in the Middle East, the Yazidis to this day of northern Iraq. They're near Mount Sinnar. They claim that Lucifer is the real God of this world, and I don't disagree. He took over by force when he showed up here, like whatever, a couple 100,000 years ago. He and his crew took over, and he is the God of this world. He's the God of the Bible that most people would know as Jehovah or Yahweh. What's really confusing, and what I've come to understand recently, is in the New Testament, the Father that Christ is speaking about is not Lucifer, is not Yahweh. It's not Enki. Which is weird. I mean, it's very convoluted, this whole thing. And it's by design.
Yes.
Because if you think about it, you're dealing with a psychopathic, schizophrenic, multiple personality kind of guy. You would expect this, right? I'm the God of good and evil. I'll be nice to you one day and then, you know, whip you the next. It's just, it's crazy. I mean, literally. But so what I've come to understand is that a lot of things were left out of the Bible, especially over time. And again, it's so that we would be confused. That's the whole purpose, because it makes it easier to control us, right? So, but the Father that Christ was talking about was the real creator of everything, and he was actually. This has been, I believe, has been heavily edited, so that we don't get the whole story. He was actually not just speaking about the Father. He was metaphorically speaking about the creators of all that is. And that would be a mother and father, because if you observe nature, fathers don't give birth, right? None of us got here without a mother. None of us, okay? It's just idiotic to even look at it any other way. It's just not how it works. So Christ definitely came from a divine lineage, but it wasn't just a father. But anyway, that's just the way it was interpreted. And it's the reason I preface that is because Enki wants us to call him and believe that he is our father in his own convoluted thinking. I mean, that's what he told me when I met him back in 1985. Or I should say, when he confronted me. So I'll tell you, here's some Gnostic teachings that anybody can access through my website in the library section. I just put them up recently, and I find them quite insightful, revealing. So the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that is metaphorically where we are now. That is the creation of Lucifer or Enki. And so what we get from the fruits of that tree are law, the legal system, sin, ordinances, judgment, wrath, jealousy, rulers, controllers, pride, and death. Those are the fruits of that tree of good and evil, okay? That's just from a Gnostic perspective. However, the opposite of that is called the tree of life. Notice how most people don't even talk about it, because in the Bible, we're not allowed to eat of that tree. so they don't even discuss it. It's off limits. That particular, and that's the real universe. It's, again, metaphorically. These are not real trees, people. We're talking metaphorically here. The fruits of the tree of life are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faith, gentleness, temperance, and life. Not the life that we think of here. Where we are now is a form of death for our soul. In the sense that we have, we're under all the restrictions of the Luciferian Empire. And so things like astral travel, telepathy, even to a large degree empathy, it's forbidden here. It is inhibited or prohibited to some degree. So when we think of it's kind of ridiculously backwards. When we come into what we're calling a physical life, that is actually a form of death for our soul, because we're no longer living a spiritual life. We are no longer unencumbered and living as spirit beings, because that's how we were truly originally created. That is our true nature, and that's what at some point most of us will return to when we're ready. The problem is that there's so many distractions and forms of manipulation going on here. They want us to stick around. The Luciferians are not all powerful, or they wouldn't be pulling all these tricks on us all the time, right? And they do need us, or they would have kicked us out or killed us a long time ago. If they could, they would, and they don't. They can't.
Yeah, they need us. We don't need them.
Well, okay, so, but is this serving a purpose? Is all this, because I used to think this was just an infection and it was a big mistake. But if you're a divine intelligence, I've often wondered, so why would you create a forbidden zone? If that's how it really went down. I know from a Christian perspective, most people would just say, oh, come on, that's not what it says in the Bible. It's just his ego. He was an angel and he was supposed to serve us, and he got it pissed off that the number one angel had to serve these lowly humans, right? Well, we were never low in all. In fact, one of the reasons, and I've studied these Christian teachings, and especially through the Gnostic versions, the main reason Lucifer was jealous is because we are not lower. We are direct. Those of us that have a soul who came here are directly from the divine parents. And Lucifer is not. From a Christian perspective, he is an angel. He doesn't have a soul the way we do. He is not one of the seeds directly from the parents, the divine mother and father. He was created by them to serve us. And apparently he didn't like it. So that's another version. And I don't know which one is correct. Honestly, maybe neither one is. Maybe it's something else entirely that we're not being allowed to see. But at least we're discussing it, I mean, I think it's really important that people at least are aware to some degree of what it is that we're all involved in it, whether we like it or not. There's no refuge from this. Believe me, if there was, I'd be there right now, because honestly, I'm very, very tired, sick and tired of this, being here like this under these conditions.
You can almost draw a parallel with, say, like a level 4 bio warfare lab, where you have these contagions and these pathogens, but in our example, they are whatever infected Enki and his crew when he went to this forbidden zone. And nowadays there's all this talk about nanites, nanotechnology, what have you. But in this scheme of things, any form of technology, no matter how miniaturized or minute, there is that ghost in the machine element, that demonic, archontic, demiurgic element. Another person who talks about this, Robert, is Tracy Harding, an Australian novelist and fantasist. She talks about how this crew of originals, whatever she called them, they went to this forbidden zone through a Stargate, and then they wound up getting infected and they brought this infection back with them, and then it permeated the entire cosmos and the entire plane of existence. So,
Okay.
and if we look at it from that standpoint, that it's, for lack of a better term, an infection, and then now we have all the modern day examples, so-called, of spy dust, of nanites, and what have you, then we begin to see the nature of the problem, because the way that it like goes down the scale. This place has been described, Robert, as a theater of pain, as a dimension of pain, and we see it in the endless wars. We see it in the truncated lifespan of humans, where we just don't live long enough to just wake up one day and recognize the nature of the manipulation.
You know what? And it's really interesting you brought that up, because that's another very good article that Wes Penray wrote called The Death Trap, or was it, sorry, Soul Trap. I forget now. I'm sorry. I can't remember half the titles of the articles here. Hold on. Let me see here.
He's got so many articles. That's the thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good one. Here, well, hang on. I need to give you it's at the very top of my article section. It's called The Death Trap and How to Avoid It. I'm not even sure if this is possible, because I've been studying this a lot lately, and there's various interpretations. But even science recently has noticed that there's an energy field around our planet, not the Van Allen radiation belts or something else, that they said, what the hell is this? It looks like something out of Star Trek. Is it protecting us or what? It's actually a soul net. It's a net now. Wes claims that it used to be just an entire bubble of energy around the planet that would prevent any soul from migrating off this world once they are physically dead, right? Once they leave their body. I guess you could do it through astral travel as well, and that's all being prevented. So there was this bubble of energy. It has become more porous over time, according to Wes. He claims that people that, like ourselves, that are more aware and awake, have, with their intent of will, have poked holes through this thing, and so it's more like a net now. But anyway, the reason that I have shortened our lifespan is because every time we physically die and our soul leaves the body, they convince us to come back here, and every time they do, they erase our memory of the previous life. They either erase it or block it as best they can. And they tell us it's because it's for our own good. Look, you're going to a new family. You don't want to be burdened with all the memories of a previous family. And I mean, they have to do it that way.
Yeah.
I know it sounds weird, but and this is not excusing their behavior in any way. I'm just saying that I understand how they think. Having the couple times that I interfaced with Enki directly, he really did a number on me. He wanted me to think he was God, that he was the Father, and I really was. I wouldn't consider myself a Luciferian, but he definitely had me under his influence for almost 30 years. And so I kind of have an insight on it's pretty easy for me to figure them out now. Easier than it would be for most people. Okay. It was not easy at all. It wasn't. Just saying that, if you hang out with somebody or you've had encounters with them, you know them better than somebody who've never ever met them. But so the soul trap thing is very essential to them controlling our consciousness, because if we had memories of every lifetime, or say we lived 1,000 years on average, we'd become a lot more intelligent, or at least aware, over the course of that lifetime or lifetimes. If we had that continuity, our consciousness would be much, much more difficult to control for the Luciferians.
Yes, and by swiping, doing the mind swipe, a lot of us have had past lives as shamans, as mystics, as seers, as adepts, and in other lives we were strategists and whatnot. By wiping the slate clean and being dropped into some family that may not even be ideal for us, and then we have to go through all this hardship, it's easier to keep us under control. And then you throw in the supernatural, if you will, the hyperdimensional aspect, where there's all these shadow beings around, there's all these jinn all over the place that tempt us to put, archontic thoughts in our head, etc., etc. And then we find ourselves in situations, social constructs, families, institutions that are permeated with this demiurgic spirit, with this mind infection. Mm-hmm. We really don't know the difference, Robert. It's like, I was just thinking about this today, about how many so many kids. It's like they're just really plugged into their smartphones. They're plugged into their tablets. They're already more than halfway to becoming Borg.
Right. Yeah, and that's serving the Luciferian agenda, because at some point, when it's time for us to be used as a battering ram to annihilate the Court of Orion. Now, it'll be done by a Special Forces contingent, but they're coming from our world. And if he has his way, then this world, this solar system, will continue to be part of his empire, which is expanded into the Orion Empire, which is where he originated from, allegedly. And, so that's his goal. And he wants us to all to be, as he said, he's a jealous God. He wants us to all worship him or work for him. And this is the way he's ensuring that, is by addicting people to the technology, his false light technology.
Now, in the recent past, we've had a lot of discussion, heard a lot of discussion about Planet X, about Nibiru. This comes up again and again in Sitchin's work, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people try to interpret it this way or that. What are your thoughts on that? Because still, there are some, I consider, credible channels on YouTube where there does seem to be this extra astronomical body or bodies in the solar system, but we haven't seen much more progress in that front. I mean, it may be there. Is it getting any closer? Is it starting to manifest in the form of seismic volcanic activity? What's your take on that, Robert?
I don't lend much credence to it at all. Like most of the things that Zechariah wrote. Look, I'll give you an example. One of his works is called The Lost Book of Enki.
Oh, yes. Total fraud.
No, it's not. It's a work of fiction, and he says so right in the foreword, but nobody reads that part. They just jump right into it and go, oh, this is like all the other books, because it's written the same way, which makes me think, okay, so which came first, all the other fiction? And then he just figured, well, I'll just tell him, sort of like a disclaimer, a hidden disclaimer that it's all just my... Look, he's not the only one. Billy Meyer was the same way. His contact notes are with one of the entities is Ptah.
Ptah, yeah.
That's another name for Enki.
Yes.
And he's having these mental conversations, and like humans are just basically earthworms or whatever he called us, and they are the almighty Palladian gods or something, and but it was just more of the same. It's Luciferian, and so technically Billy Meyer's a Luciferian, and that's why a lot of his stuff is completely convoluted and not true. Turns out, right?
One of the Palladians was also named Semyazi, which is
also in the Book of Enoch, right?
Yes.
Semyaz, yeah, I know. Although, Semyaz in the Book of Enoch is a man. The thing is, it's the same people. They part of the subterfuge is they keep changing their name, but they can't change their behavior. They don't really have a plan B, and this is one of the reasons they get so freaked out, especially recently, because there's so many people here that are waking up. And to some measure, I should say, the Luciferians themselves are responsible for that waking up of these people. Because they're acting so crazy, it's making people go, wait a second, this makes no sense whatsoever. And so they're questioning so-called authority or the media, the government, etc. And this is causing the Luciferians to become even more desperate and act more crazy. And it's sort of like it's growing exponentially like a snowball rolling down a hill. They're really not as easily fooled. Part of it too is, and this is again going back to part of what Wes Penray's research has said, By the way, a lot of his research, he is citing a lot of various sources out there that some of them I accept, others I don't. But the point is, he's doing an analysis of things as he finds them, that's good. And you can see a progression in his thought process as he's exposed to different and new information. But one of the things he said was from 87 to 2012. Actually, he reported it. He didn't make this up. He just said that the energy on this world was increasing from 87 to 2012, and it was altering our consciousness. I think it's been breaking down the barriers, the firewalls that were implanted in us so that we could not be connected to each other and the cosmos, the real creation. So that's part of the healing process. That's one of the contingency plans that's been going on, and I believe that it's continuing. It's just that everybody who survived through that period from 87 to 2012, even if you were born like 2011, you would be a different person than anybody who came before 87. It started, some of us were early adapters, like Whitley Strieber, myself, and some others. We started in 85. Things started getting completely nuts for us. And, so anyway, after 2012, things, everybody was different. Our consciousness was different. And the momentum, I feel, was on the side of the benevolent ones here. Those of us who are connected with the benevolent ones, we have more awareness and ability now than we've ever had in the past. And this is by design. And it's really all about consciousness and making good choices, or well-informed choices, I should say, because the Luciferians want us to know they need our consent to do a lot of this nonsense. And this is why they lie to us and promote really stupid, insane things that are harmful to us. Because they want to be able to say, look, they agreed to it. They need to do that, okay? Because the free will is the prime directive. Using a Star Trek term is kind of a lousy analogy, but in the divine sense, free will has to be respected universally in order for the whole creation to keep going, or I should say, keep growing.
Yeah, it creates this kind of cascading effect when this agreement, tacit agreement, or even an agreement by, through coercion or through deception, whatever the case may be, that agreement kind of, it becomes embedded in the fabric of reality, and we kind of get, like a signatory to all this stuff. So that's the first step, is to recognize, wait a minute, I don't need to be a party to this anymore. And as far as the Lost Book of Enki, I meant fraud insofar as it was yet another example of Enki saying, don't blame me for all this, right? It was like, I tried to save the human race. I was trying to do everything good, and then, it was the other guys that did it. And so, we've got to this point in time now with this energetic shift, energetic flux, where on the one hand, there is this awakening, and the strength of character, strength of spirit of the people that we network with is really off the charts. And I don't remember a time, going back, my awakening was about 85, 88 time period too. I can't remember a time when there was so many really switched on people of such character, such integrity, and such spirit. And on the other hand, other end of the spectrum, some people, pardon my Anunnaki, they're going batshit crazy. People that were borderline, kind of schizo, borderline, crazy, they've gone off the rails. So we're starting to see, this dichotomy at work.
Well, yeah, because they have to, right. Their agenda is that, I know Ray Kurzweil said the singularity is going to be 2045. I think it's a lot sooner than that. Relatively speaking, and it could happen as early as 2025, just right around the corner. And at that time, I think they will have created enough super soldiers and space technology and just really incredible weapon systems that are linked to AI. And I don't mean dumb AI. I'm talking about what they call strong AI. Very intelligent in the sense that it has a parameter, okay? I mean, whatever it may be, like kill enemy combatants. All right, well, that's pretty vague. But what happens is when you run a simulation enough times, what happens is it learns every time you run the simulation, which they do before they release the damn thing. It runs simulations over and over and over again. This was, believe me, it started as something called artificial life. It wasn't called artificial intelligence. They did it in a computer. The original one that we are allowed to know about was called Sugarscape, where there was digital black and red ants that were fighting over a digital pile of sugar. And every time they ran the simulation, it was a little bit different. And these digital ants would adapt to that because that was part of the program. The rules were not so strict in the sense that they were really very basic. And part of the program was it was allowed to adapt to the conditions. And so this is what I said. It's simulating life, but it isn't. And this leads me to something that I'm really not comfortable talking about, which is there are people, entities here that are not, they don't have a soul.
Absolutely.
And well, you could say that, but for me, I couldn't believe that up until recently. It didn't make any sense to me but now I'm starting to see that this is the way Lucifer, operates. He figured out there was a way to create, in mythical terms, they're called golem. Mm-hmm. And there's a way to animate inanimate objects. And God, I know it sounds like magic, and on some level it is, but on another level it's technology. That's really what it is. It's a technique. That's what technology means. It's a repeatable technique, right? That gets the same results every time. You switch it on and boom, it works, right? Unless it's broken. This is what we're talking about here. There's a way. They figured out a way. He figured it out because think about it. This is a really dangerous guy because he was a divine god, a builder of worlds. And then for somebody like that to become criminally insane, that is extremely, extremely dangerous. And his motivation is this reclaim what his birthright. So he feels justified, the ends justify the means, and so basically anything goes with him up to a point. Yeah.
And it gives a whole new meaning to the term or the concept of "and the dead shall rise again," because you take organic inert matter, if you will, and then animate it in some way, and it's operating to an internal program and sub-programs. It has all the outward appearances of life. Yeah. And it may even learn on its own and do things beyond its programming, but is it still life as we understand it? And that's the question. And we have to hang on to our organic connection to source, because that is what's going to get us through this mess. Well, we've reached the end of a fascinating first half, Robert. We're just getting started too. If you like what we do, if you believe in what we do, please go to thecosmicswitchboard.com, sign up and become a member, and we'll see you at the top of the next hour.